Welcome, Music Worcester fans. Adrien Finlay here. I have the wonderful honor and great privilege of having on the phone with me today our fantastic pianist who we welcome on Sunday, January 10th, Simone Dinnerstein. Simone, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, first things first, we know you have an incredibly busy schedule this season and so much going on. I wanted to go right to the root of January 10th. The Bach Goldberg variations have such a place in your career, in your training, and in everything surrounding your rise to the top of the profession. Why the Goldbergs now? Why again?
Well, I have always been performing the Goldberg variations since I learned them, which was back in 2001. I've performed them off and on. You know, I leave them for a few years and then I come back to them. And this coming season, coming up, marks the 10th anniversary of when I gave my debut with the Goldberg Variations in New York City. And then coming up in 2017 is going to be the 10th anniversary of the release of my recording of the Goldberg Variations. So kind of gearing up to playing it more in those years. And I'm also doing some interesting projects in February of 2016. The exciting thing that's coming up is that I'm going to be spending a month in Paris because I'm going to be collaborating with the ballet company at the Opera House in Paris on the Jerome Robbins choreography of the Goldberg Variations.
Oh my goodness!
And so I'm kind of getting ready to do that, and so we organized a bunch of other performances of the Goldberg Variations surrounding that event.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Well, I know I've listened to so many interviews and read so many of your interviews where you have very specific ideas around Bach, and I was wondering if I might just ask you to return to some of those concepts that you have elaborated on so eloquently elsewhere in prep for January 10th. One of my favorite quotes that I've seen, and I think it came out of the Strange Beauty project, was a statement from you about when you play, perform, perhaps even listen to Bach, it makes you feel clean. And is that still the case, especially with a mammoth piece like the Bach Goldbergs?
Yes, I would say that I still feel that way, and I've thought a lot about what that means to feel clean, and I think what I feel is that Bach's music is extremely honest, and there aren't any pretensions in the music, and there's nothing really between the craft of it and the expression of the music. It's all linked together, and that's really not often the case for most music. It's almost like when you listen to Bach's music, it's like you can see the bones and the veins and the muscles of the person that you're looking at. I mean, everything is there, and their soul and their heart. And even though Bach's music can be interpreted in so many ways, I mean, it's really remarkable, the range of interpretation that it lends itself to. You're always very strongly aware of it being Bach, no matter who it is that's playing it and what style they're playing it in, and I find that very remarkable.
That is just an extraordinary analogy. Thank you. Along similar lines, perhaps, we know that we have a contingent of Music Worcester supporters who will be there on January 10th who have not heard this amazing work live before. I'm sure you get this question quite a bit, but would you have anything to say, whether it was how a listener might prepare themselves, himself or herself, what they might listen to, what they might think about if they are, for the first time in their lives, hearing this music live?
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting is if if a listener has heard the piece on recording and then they see it played live, it can often be very surprising how it looks, because visually, what the pianist is doing, partially because playing it on the piano is different than the instrument that Bach wrote it for. He wrote it for a dual manual harpsichord, so you would have had instances where one hand would be on one keyboard and the other hand would be on the other keyboard. On a piano, you have only one keyboard, and so there are all sorts of acrobatics that take place that you might not be aware of when you're just listening to it. Oftentimes the hands are crossing over each other in sometimes kind of extreme ways, and sometimes the hands are sharing the same keys even, and so it's very exciting to watch, I think. Then, I mean, there are all sorts of structures to listen to that can be kind of anchor points when you're listening. I mean, it's a very long piece. It's about, 80 to 90 minutes long, and yet there is a very, very clear architecture to the piece. And so some of the from the very large structure, which is that it starts and ends with an aria. The same aria repeats at the very end. And all the variations are based on the left hand of the aria. So the harmonic chord progression, which is outlined in the aria, it's not on the beautiful melody of the aria, but on that chord progression. That chord progression appears in every single variation. So that's something that you can kind of listen out. Sometimes you hear it very clearly. Sometimes it's kind of hidden and woven into the music. And then it's 30 variations, and after variation 15, I usually have a glass of orange juice. You'll notice that. And then this variation 16 is a French, it's sort of in the style of a French overture. It sounds kind of like an orchestral overture to an opera almost. And so it's very clearly that second half has started, a new half has begun. And then if you go even a little bit down to smaller units, every third variation in the set is a canon. And, we know them more commonly as rounds. When we sing a round, it's the same thing, where one voice starts a melody and then shortly afterwards a second voice enters, imitating what the first voice just did. And so every third variation will be a canon, and usually it's written for three voices. So you'll hear two voices in a canon, and then the bass line below that, playing that bass line from the aria. I think that if you kind of think about those things as just anchors, then you can delve into it further. I mean, there are many, many more. That's just the most basic kind of structure that's going on. But It's interesting to think about that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And I think the only thing I would like to ask as a final question is, you have such a reputation as having forged your own career. Certainly some of that was by design, and no one has done it quite like you. And I was everything from crowdsourcing the first Goldberg recording to all of your collaborations, and you've already hinted at some very different things coming up, like your month in Paris here very soon. I was wondering if you might give us any other hints about what's in store in the upcoming years for you.
I actually have some really exciting projects coming up. I'm involved at the moment in commissioning Philip Glass to write a piano concerto for me.
Oh, wow.
Which will be, very exciting. It's going to be a concerto for piano and strings, and he's writing it to be paired with a Bach keyboard concerto for piano and strings.
Excellent.
So that's very exciting, and I'm going to be playing that with lots of different orchestras and touring it with this wonderful string orchestra from Boston called A Far Cry.
We know them well.
Oh yeah, they're great. And another exciting project I have is in a couple of years' time, I'm going to be doing a collaboration with a choreographer, New York-based choreographer called Pam Tanowitz. And she has a company with 6 dancers, and we are going to be working on a new choreography of the Goldberg variations, which I'm very excited about. So that's going to be a really interesting collaboration, especially after having done the Jerome Robbins choreography.
Right. Oh, amazing. Well, Simone, thanks again for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you for agreeing to come back to Worcester next month. We are so looking forward to the performance. And for anyone...
I'm really looking forward.
Oh, it'll be fantastic to welcome you back. And to any of our listeners who might not yet have their tickets, that is taking place on Sunday, January 10th at 3 p.m. at Tuckerman Hall here in downtown Worcester. Full details and chance to buy tickets at www.musicworcester.org. Thanks again, Simone. See you next month.
Thanks, Adrien.